Hello everyone, welcome back to the Platform, the video podcast for the railfan and the model railroader. We are somewhere along the north shore of Lake Ontario, between Toronto and Montreal, next to a very busy right-of-way. The right-of-way being, of course, our fourth guest. But the three guests I have with me on the platform tonight is my action red brother from another mother, Neil Schofield. Next to Neil, we have Bob Scott, the owner of the Credit Valley Railway Company, the largest hobby shop in Canada, cvrco.ca. I got that right, Bob?
You got it right.
All right.
Awesome.
Said .com one time, and Bob,
that's all right. It'll go the same place.
You subjected me to electrical shock therapy, and it bothered me, so I've got it right. At the end of the platform, we have Dave McLean. Dave is the co-founder of Little Canada. Check them out online at little-canada.ca.
Got it.
Dave is also a member of the O-Scale Model Railroad Club of Canada, and he is a two-rail O-Scaler extraordinaire modeling the Dominion Atlantic Railway, Nova Scotia. So I've said before, I have two friends that name Dave and O-Scale. I've got three-rail Dave and two-rail Dave. You're in my phone as two-rail Dave.
Two-rail Dave.
Yeah, two-rail.
Like I said, less is more.
I won't tell you what Neil is in my phone.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you that after. As I said, we have a fourth guest, and I think I hear a horn maybe showing up shortly. The fourth guest is, of course, the railway. We're here to railfan. We're here to talk trains, big and small. And should the trains come by and interrupt us, it's a welcome interruption, and we invite you to take in the action live with us. Guys, I got a news flash for you. I'm glad you're sitting down, but it just came in over the wire. The hobby is changing. Yeah, it's changing again.
Again?
Yeah, it's changing. The hobby is changing. That's the word.
Was that a tweet or?
Yeah,
right.
It came in on Twitter.
Yeah, that's right.
Came in on Messenger Pigeon. Yeah.
Telegraph.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I think there's some truth to that. Some people want to say the hobby's dying. I don't even want to talk about that. I don't agree with it. I think that's a very convenient answer for some people. It's pessimistic for sure. I think the hobby is probably growing sideways, but it's definitely changing. Bob, you've seen that in 20 or 26 years.
26 years, of course. It's always changing. It's like anything in real life. It's evolving into something else. There's so many different venues to see model trains now. I mean, people never had that many shows to see real model trains and the Fremo, aspect. You've got T-Track now becoming very popular for people that don't have a lot of room. It's not dying by any means. It's a lot of younger kids into it, a lot of young fathers with young kids trying to get into it. I think in one of our last segments that we had, we were talking about different kits that are out there and model trains and how you can get into it relatively cheap and have some real fun with your kids. Yeah. And again, it's changing. It's not disappearing by any means.
Bob, I think I hear the fourth guest arriving.
So do I.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's a...
Let's swing the cameras. Let's have a wave.
It's an eastbound.
Yeah, we've got an eastbound, probably a via.
Oh, I don't know.
What do we got?
It's a freight.
Freight train.
There we go. I'm going to get up and have a look. It'll definitely have a DPU on it.
Yeah.
This portion of the platform is brought to you by ScaleTrains.com, developing model railroad products that modelers will be excited to own. You can see the difference. And by ITLA Scale Models, where the city meets the railway, providing unique and configurable laser-cut structure kits to the modeling community.
The cars bounce over the grade crossing. Yeah. I'm surprised at the amount of brand new equipment. Yeah. A lot of new cars. sad when you see wheel sets being moved around now by truck.
Yeah.
It's like, what's with that, right? Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Yeah. Huh. Wow. That's an unusual move. Wow. Wow.
It's like what, 8 of them, 9 of them, 12 of them. I counted 12.
12, wow. Yeah, C1 is unusual. Yeah.
It's funny that not all the trains have DPUs for some reason. Some do, some don't. I don't know if they just.
Yeah.
You notice that some of the container trains, I notice the intermodals will put 2 or 3 units up front and no DPU.
Right.
And yet we saw one earlier that was eastbound
Yeah.
that
they
had a single unit on the front and a DPU. And it was a
middle,
double stack.
right.
But it was, I don't know if it must have to do with gradient, ruling grade. Maybe there's
Tonnage.
more of a grade west than there is east.
Especially on modal trains, because there's a lot less slack action.
Yeah.
Because you get the
Some drawbar connections.
yeah.
I think was it Trains Magazine just had an article in the last 2 months
Yeah.
about DPUs and the distribution of forces across
yeah.
consist and how there's actually computer programs that somebody designed just to figure it out where the appropriate place to put a DPU is in a train. and
Based
how they
on the
do that.
weight on
Yeah.
cars on either side.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
I
kinda
know out
interesting.
west on the classic Canadian Pacific out west, going through the spiral tunnels and so on, the coal trains and grain trains.
Oh,
There's math. I mean, it's
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
we put the mid train behind the 80th car or
Right.
something like that. It's very exact. It's very exact. But
Right.
you think about it, there's a lot of forces at play.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of forces at play there.
Yeah.
There, speaking of the hobby changing, railroading's changing. We never
Yeah.
used to see DPUs.
No, single engine trains. You
Yeah.
see that? Even single engine trains now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but that's what happens. You have 4, 5, 6,000 horsepower, and
Yeah.
Yeah, back in growing up in Massachusetts, the Conrail's XB&A line, which is now CSX Boston line, that was always, I think it was a 8,000 ton limit going up over the Berkshires. I think it was like a 1.6% grade, so they always limited the size of the trains.
Right.
In the last probably year and a half, they'd use DPUs now. So,
Right.
I mean, you see a 140, 160 car train going
Right.
over the Berkshires, which was unheard
You
of.
never used to, yeah.
Yeah. So
there's got to be great efficiencies for the railways.
Yeah.
Fuel economy, crewing, equipment.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the crewing doesn't change with the DPU; it's unmanned. But there's got to be, maybe there's got to be efficiencies somewhere.
There's
Oh,
less
yeah. Less crews, less
less crews, less train breaks or
Yeah.
pull aparts,
Yeah.
which are huge time wasters. 3-4 hours can be blown away just by having a broken knuckle.
And I suppose in the wintertime, they can build air
Right.
quicker.
Yeah.
Because now you've got a compressor halfway through the train.
Right.
You
Yeah,
can
that's
build
true.
air. It's hard to pump air. Get 90 psi
And get
from
it
a
at the rear
compressor
end. Cold
a mile and a half through a train line to
Right,
the
especially in the
40,
winter.
40 below.
Yeah, it's very tough. I've heard of crews not getting out of terminals because they sat and pumped air and just to no avail. So
Wow.
this is life on the platform, folks. We talk trains big and small, and when the fourth guest appears, we take advantage of it. I should mention very quickly, we do have a Railstream rail cam that is mounted on the station here, keeping an eye on our favorite grade crossing, which crosses over 2 super elevated main lines, making for some very interesting high-speed vehicular crossings, especially northbound over the road. And we'll bring you some video footage should we hear an oil pan scrape or a brake supply at a rapid speed. We hear skids, we hear yells, we hear all kinds of things. It's pandemonium here at the platform. So guys, the hobby's changing. Dave, talk to me about changes you've seen, and maybe with at Little Canada and also at the O-Scale Club.
Thanks, Bob. I'll start with Little Canada, and probably the question we get asked the most is, do you guys use a lot of 3D printers? So, I mean, that's something that people see as the next wave in model building, and there's some real value to that. So, I'll say too, before we start on the 3D printer thing, we've had even though we're not open to the public, we've had about 3,000 visitors come through our attraction to date. And a lot of them are, people under the age of 30. And I thought, going into this, that would be a hard group to impress. What the results are actually quite the opposite, because they collectively, that under 30 group hasn't been exposed to model building at all in their lifetime. Their world is what's inside their phone. The whole physical reality of building something in miniature to the detail level that we're doing is completely foreign to them. So they're actually blown away, and they're very, very excited about it. And we've asked people to rate it, and they've actually given us one of the highest ratings in terms of, would you recommend this to others? Which is
The
important.
30 and below?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So, I mean, people are interested in this. And I see the whole idea of 3D printing. Although we've started to use 3D printing. It's a slow process. You need the hardware is getting less expensive. There's a lot of great software out there, but there's still a bit of a learning curve. But it's pretty slow. I mean, to create a figure like this tall out of any sort of object in 3D printing, that's hours of printing time. It's probably 4 or 5 hours to print something this tall. Mind you can go to sleep and do it, have it done in the morning when you wake up. So I think that's going to change the hobby. You don't need the tools and the lifetime experience using this product and that product. You can just print it out. So I think it'll spawn a whole new generation of interest in building miniatures. I think it's because it's going to be easier for people to do it. So the hobby will change probably a little away from sort of traditional model building techniques that we're all familiar with, to more things that can be done in 3D printing. Hey, everyone can create a garbage pail or a fire hydrant or something, but they'll eventually get to the point, I think, where 3D printers will become fast enough and inexpensive enough. You'll be able to print a building. You'll be able to download those models. You'll have companies that will sell high-quality models, three-dimensional models of a building, and if you want to buy it, it's going to cost X dollars, and you go and print it out at your own leisure. That's what I see the hobby and how it's changing.
Almost technology-based, like anything in the world today. It's about learning the program to do it, not necessarily getting out a X-Acto knife and the airbrush.
Yeah.
Like some of the styrene buildings that you were talking about on another episode. Something like that, you could design it in 3D and then print it off, even with the different types of stucco or brick on the outside that you'd want.
It's all a matter of, I guess, we talked maybe in that episode, I talked about maybe 2 to 4 hours to design that. It's all comes to a compromise. Does it take me 2 hours to design it in CAD, or does it take me 2 hours to build it? But there's a compromise. A bigger structure would probably take more time, so it might be better to 3D print it and stuff. So.
The most useful tool that we have, and I think it'll become part of the model builder's arsenal, is laser engravers, laser cutters, and cutting materials using a laser, which is fundamentally just a very sharp, very accurate, very fast knife. Using high-intensity laser to cut through materials. We use it extensively at Little Canada, and it's a great model building tool. I've used it for some of my personal model building, on off hours, create window mullions, things like this that, you couldn't buy inexpensively or buy at all because it's just not available.
You realize that 10 a.m. on a Monday is not off hours. When you're using the laser for your own projects, you realize that.
That's new.
Dave, can you use the laser to cut styrene? There's a heat melting issue there.
Yeah, styrene is a
there a way
relatively
to get
soft
around
plastic.
that,
It's
or?
great, for model building because you can score it with a knife, but the problem with it is that it melts too quickly.
Yeah,
So-
can you cut it with a laser or no?
You can.
Okay.
You can. You can't cut thin cross sections or thin pieces. It gets too soft.
Yeah.
We use a lot of acrylics and other types of product, laser board, paper-based products that are like a very, very thin, very hard cardboard. You can then do extremely fine detail on that. I mean, wrought iron fencing in HO scale, and the beauty of that, you can what would take you a day or more, a month, or you wouldn't even be able to do it in HO or any scale because it's just too time consuming. The laser does it in 3 minutes.
How much time and effort go into actually designing the fence, like drawing the fence up?
Well, that's a great question. So you could download an image from Google Earth or anywhere on the web and put it into a Photoshop where it does the rendering. Done. You know,
Okay.
and then
Wow.
then you know, then you only have to design one piece. You can reflect it or do other things, and you could make a fence that's 6 feet long, and you've only designed a 1/4 inch.
I suppose, yeah, because
Yeah.
you just copy it
Repeat.
almost like
Just
anything. The
keep
CAD
like a
just
repeat
copies
Yeah.
it, yeah.
I remember one day I was there, and I think it was the gargoyles that are on the top of the
Yeah.
apartment buildings, and probably use the same, aspect for,
Yeah.
for cutting those, and tell the machine to cut 100, and then they're all
Yeah,
done,
it-
and then you're
yeah.
placing them, and they're just incredible
It's
detail.
a great tool, and I know Micromark, for instance, sells a laser engraver now, a smaller one. But when they get to be less expensive, it'll be in everyone's
Everybody will have
arsenal.
it, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, Dave, you're telling me that you can take an image off of Google Images
Yep.
and clip it, save it somehow to your desktop, drop that into a photo editing software like
Yep.
Photoshop,
Right.
and Photoshop will make a rendering of that image.
Yep.
You can scale it up or down wherever you want it, and you can send that to the laser cutter.
Yep. Like your T-shirt, the Canadian, the actual lettering on your T-shirt. I actually made a sign, the Canadian, and I used that software. I used the exact lettering. I created using software. You can actually draw the edges. It'll draw it automatically for you. Send it to the
That's
laser.
incredible.
Yeah.
Done. And
Yeah,
it's
that
takes
is
minutes.
incredible.
Minutes. It takes more time to figure out the painting than it does to actually do the
Yeah.
cutting of the.
I can just hear people saying now, they're driving in their car, maybe listening to this, and they're hitting the steering wheel and they're screaming, "That's not modeling. Back in my day, we used a pencil," and I say bull hockey.
Well,
It
you
is
look at how
modeling.
the hobby's changed. Back
Absolutely.
Look at Model Railroad magazine from 1935. It was all about sourcing the materials, tin cans and shoe polish and all that to make your models, and wood, and if you're lucky to have a soldering iron, or and it was all about how to build that scratch-built locomotive that and you had to have use your drill as a little lathe and all that. Well, that era is gone. Now you can went into high-quality materials that are available to brass locomotives are readily available to now. Now it's modeling is changing. And I think it makes it more interesting because you have to spend less time. You want to build a building with 100 windows in styrene, that takes time to cut them all out. In a laser, 3 minutes and it's done.
I had mentioned earlier, a couple of years ago, I had actually invested in one of the cricket cutters.
Yeah.
And I actually, it was on Model Railroad Hobbyist. I had seen it advertised. And I thought, boy, one of the structures on my layout in Orleans was the Ethan Allen furniture plant. It was a very large industry. And I had built a lot of the buildings and got everything set up, but one of the most challenging aspects of it, right on the main building that was right parallel to the tracks, which I was going to model, there was custom lettering, very much like your shirt said, the Canadian. It said Ethan Allen Furniture,
Right.
but it was in cursive. So it's not like you could get a font or anything. So what I did is I bought the Cricut cutter, and one of the things that we mentioned with technology is a challenging part of learning the program.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's a balance between do you want to whip out the razor blade and try and cut it out yourself, which I knew I'd had no chance of doing. But anyways, I ended up taking CAD, tracing out that photo that I had taken,
Right.
put it into the Cricut cutter software, and it was in cursive and everything else. And it took some experimentation and stuff like
Sure.
that, some trial and error.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I was able to cut it out in cursive, and it says Ethan
Yep.
Allen, home of Orleans Furniture, or something like
And
that.
it
It's in
looks
cursive.
bang on.
It looks. I'm pretty
it's
happy with it.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah, it looks really good.
It's something that I couldn't have. There was no really other way to
Right.
do it, so it
And,
worked out pretty good.
Bobby would probably say more than anyone else. I mean, how the hobby's changed from a hobby of craftsmen, back in the day, where you had to have a lot of skills and knowledge to, even people would build rolling stock, and I'm talking an O scale. I mean, back in the 40s, it was very common to build kits. In fact, it was the only way you could get things.
Well, sure, yeah.
Now it's ready to run,
Ready to
rolling
run,
stock, ready to run
ready to
buildings.
go. And the detail parts have changed. I mean, there's still some companies that are still out there that you can buy the proper horn, the proper wind shade, winterization hatch for your locomotive. But so many locomotives now come with all those details and road number specific. That, okay, well, we don't have to detail that anymore, but I'm going to build a building and I'm going to put the vents on the roof, I'm going to put the HVAC, I'm going to put the drainage pipes down the side. I'm thinking of that, some of the buildings that we looked at earlier, and the detail that you would do, like with the eaves troughs and all that sort of thing. And that's where I see a lot of the the building and scratch building and all that going on now, as opposed to the locomotives and the cars, like you say, that are.
Did you guys hear that? Oh, we're gonna have to go check our Railstream camera. That was a good one. I'm gonna say that's probably about a 7.5.
It sounded pretty good.
That was good. Tire squeal, a
Sounded good.
bit of a grind and a scrape.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a new groove on the pavement out there.
Yeah. CN's have to re-gauge the track. They'll have problems going up the grade. There'll be oil. There's an oil slick.
That's right. There's a body
Yeah.
shop just down the road.
Yeah. Neil, how have you incorporated some of these newer technologies or ways of doing things?
Well,
You're an old dog.
Yeah, I've seen a few years. Yeah,
You're not done yet, though. There's still some life
I
in you.
hope not. I don't
pack
know.
it in just
you
yet.
know, it depends who you ask. Well, you know, my wife might be wishing for some of them, but no.
That's right. She's looking for the upgrade.
Yeah.
How's your
yeah,
life
so-
insurance?
She's looking for always to increase the premium if she can. Yeah, why not? But you know what? One of the things just transitioning into to what we were just talking about is, you know, you can buy a lot of ready-to-run rolling stock. I mean, the tangents, the Molokos, scale trains, Athearn, mention any of them, Rapido. You know, I have a good friend of mine, Jack, that we always talk about weathering. I mean, I really enjoy weathering freight cars in the hobby. And there's nothing better to me than getting one of these scale train cars, throwing a can of dull coat on it, spraying it up, and an hour later I'm sitting down weathering a car, and about an hour later I've got a finished car. And it's instant gratification, and it's enjoyment that sometimes, you know, when you're building a layout or something like that, to do the scenery like I was working on a few weeks ago, it takes time to get down, set up all the materials, get all the static grass out, get the static get the glue, and a couple hours where with one of these freight cars, I could sit down in an hour and bang one out, and it's something to look forward to when I get home to finish the other side of it, or something like that, especially when you only have an hour or an hour and a half to work, you know, to give a weeknight or something like that.
For me, I don't mind that some of that work is done for me.
No,
you take a
not at all.
tangent or a Moloko car.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could drill out a car, put all those grabs on, the air hoses, the lift cup, the lift
Bars,
the lift bars. You can do all that, but if it's done for you and you can get right to the weathering, that frees up hobby time to do other things.
Right.
Yep.
And this is something that the collector doesn't understand. For those of us who actually, and that applies to all of us here, for those of us who are actually wanting to build a layout, it's actually a huge service to us to have some of these things done for us. The reason everybody scratch built in the 60s was because they had to.
Yeah.
Right? There
wasn't anything else available.
Yeah, necessity is the mother of invention.
Right.
And if you can buy a tangent car and weather it in the evening, then Neil can spend more time. I know you're working on your Newport yard.
Yep.
Yeah, your Newport yard. He's working on his yard. And
shipyard beer.
yeah. And you got to learn to talk Canadian. You really do.
Hey, I
A
tried.
few more Tim Hortons and you'll be good.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
We should practice first on how to say Toronto. Not Toronto.
It's a disaster, Dave.
Well,
Don't even ask.
I say decals. I don't know what this. What do you guys talk about? Decals?
Decals.
What, how do you? I
Decals.
don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. But getting back to the weathering, if you had to spend 3 evenings detailing and weathering a car, it's less time to work on Newport Yard.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to have a display case full of scratch-built models. But if you want to fill a basement or half a basement with a working operating layout, it's a bonus
your
to have
lifetime.
some of this stuff
In your
done
lifetime,
for
yeah.
you.
Takes
And
a
that-
long time
and
to build a
that-
layout.
to me, it's the pure enjoyment of the hobby. That's what I'm doing for this. I know there's nights when I have my Newport yard to be working on. I get scenery, but I just want to weather a freight car. That's all the energy I have after a day of work. I just want something. I want that enjoyment out of the hobby. That's why
An
I
hour or
belong
two.
to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's
that's what
nothing
you
wrong
have.
with the guy that wants to scratch build
No.
whatever.
No, not at all.
Because that's their enjoyment in the hobby, and they
Yeah.
might not have any track running, or maybe they're just doing a small, 4x2 or a shelf layout or something.
Yeah.
But you find enjoyment doing that. I find enjoyment, doing wood chip cars and building all the piping and everything around the buildings and all that sort of stuff. And it's just what you find enjoyment.
Yeah.
That's what makes the hobby so
Yeah.
great. Is
It's very diverse.
it's so diverse.
You can do electronics. I mean, that's
Yeah.
one aspect of the hobby that's really changed. You look at people, blending microcontrollers, microcomputers like Arduino and Raspberry Pi and all that into, animation features or even control systems. Hey, you can control your whole layout now with
on your phone.
on
like
your
you do.
phone. Yeah, like we do, or at least you don't need to buy even have to buy a DCC station now. You just use an Arduino and download the code, and you've got a command station with a $30 Arduino box.
Dave, last time I was at the O-Scale Club visiting you, you handed me an iPad, and you had me throw switches with an iPad.
Well, it's actually, we use JMRI. I mean, that's a very common Java model railroad interface for those that haven't heard of JMRI. It's a freeware program out there that it's been worked on for 10, 15 years now. There's a whole group of people. That's their contribution to the hobby, is making this model railroad interface. So we use it combined with the program you can buy called Y-Throttle, or WeThrottle, depends how you pronounce it. It's American, Canadian, right?
Potato.
Decal.com.
And then we create with our new layout, there's no control panels anymore. There's no physical control panels. Everything is virtual. You have, you can pull up any yard on your iPad, zoom in, there's your switch, push the switch, throws the toggle, switch out in the real world throws too. Control locomotives with it. Everything's virtual now. It takes a little bit of time on the front end. You have to get a whole interface control system, but that's just a learning curve. So you can buy systems out there. There's lots of different manufacturers of Digitrax. That has some great interface systems, RR circuits, things like that. So
And that's how you get the younger kids involved too, because they really
that.
like this electronic stuff.
Yeah.
And you think of Lionel trains have been around 100 and some odd years. The old power pack and everything. Now they've got Bluetooth and everything.
Yeah.
So you
that's
can
what's
operate.
going next is Bluetooth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wireless,
Yeah, my stepson, I said, here, download this, and there's a Y-Throttle app that's free. So I said, and I told him hook it into the layout, and I said, oh, you're running one of my locomotives, on your phone. He's like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Here's a guy that doesn't really have an interest in the hobby. He appreciates it, but he thought it
but
was
it's kinda neat,
fascinating that he could
Operate the train.
operate
that
the
way.
train on his phone.
Think about how the hobby changed. Can you imagine doing that 10 years ago?
No.
It we didn't, cell phones like they are now basically we're just taking shape now. But I couldn't even imagine.
I think another way that the hobby is changing is it just me, or when you go to the big Springfield show or Train Fest or some of these other big Super Train here in Canada, some of these big shows, when did all these cottage industries spring up?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, there's all these craftsman kit companies and companies making detail parts. And where did you come from? I remember a few years ago I was at Springfield, and it seemed every other booth was somebody with wood craftsman kits, and they're beautiful.
Because they're using lasers.
That's right.
Yeah, lasers are inexpensive.
Yeah.
You got a design in your head, you do it, poof, it's done.
Back in the day, we used
Some
to open the
packaging.
Walther's catalog when it was, remember it was so thick you could press flowers with it? And
That's right.
or doorstop.
That's right.
Or wheel chalk, wheel chack. And you'd open it up, and there was the Pola and Faller, and everybody was in there. But then you go to these shows now, and like you say, with laser cutters and 3D printers, all these little cottage industries have popped up, and you go on the internet, and we could talk about the internet. All of a sudden, you punch in, say you're doing a New England waterfront scene, and you need HO lobster traps. You can Google HO lobster trap, and I guarantee you,
There'll be 5 suppliers.
boom, there'll be 5 suppliers, and 4 of them you've never heard of.
Right.
Plus
Some
the
guy in Maine is 3D printing them.
3D
or,
printing, That's
It's
where it goes,
wonderful. It is absolutely the best time for those of us who are interested in, prototype and detailing. Like the world is really your oyster.
Yeah.
Or your lobster.
Your lobster.
Lobster.
Your oyster and your
Lobster.
lobster. Bob, I want to talk to you about this briefly because you've got a unique experience. The other thing that's changing in the hobby is the supply chain. If you go back to when you started in '93, things are way different today. There's internet shopping, there's online, can you talk to us a little bit about that and sort of how things have
Well, I mean, things
changed?
have really changed, especially in as you say, the supply chain. Manufacturers have all gone to the you know, the order period of maybe 30 days, 60 days at the most, and then the product's not even coming out for a year. So the modeler and the retailer has, you know, 30 or 60 days to put an order in, hoping that they can look in their crystal ball to know how many to buy, how many for the shelf, how many customers want. And then, you know, really, there isn't another chance after that period. Most manufacturers are making models just to what they have on order.
Right.
I know in talking with some of the larger manufacturers, whether it be Atlas or Jason at Rapido, you know, if they have an order for 1,002 of something, they'll make 1,002 of that item.
Wow,
you know,
that's it. No extra supply.
no extra supply because
Right.
they want to move on to the next item. So they don't want to carry inventory. So in that case, you end up with a lot of manufacturers, not so many distributors anymore. Walthers being one that is still, you know, big enough that they're supplying a lot of the shops and
Right.
and people buying
Yeah,
directly,
inventory.
but carrying the inventory. But again, they have to decide how many they want to put on their shelf.
Right.
So it makes it pretty difficult sometimes to figure out exactly how many of these new items. And of course, if I don't put an order in, if you don't put an order in for something, then I might not order that. Somebody else might not order it, then the manufacturer's not going to make it.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas before, they would
Right.
announce something,
They just make it on spec.
they just make it on spec, you know,
Yeah.
15
If we build it, they will come.
RSD, whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In some cases, if you've got historical knowledge of a particular item. But in most cases now, if somebody doesn't order it and the next somebody doesn't and they don't have enough to meet their minimums, they won't do it.
Is that? Do you think that's decided in that 30-day window, or once they commit to a project, they're committed to it regardless of the number of orders they get?
No, I think they pretty well decide after that. You know, they might go over maybe a couple of weeks. But I know in talking again with some of the manufacturers, after those 2 weeks, all of a sudden you'll get a cancellation notice. Okay, we're not going to do this road name or that
Okay.
road name. They're still going to do a project of whatever it may be, RS3s or whatever, but they might not do all the road names or all the
Gotcha.
road numbers
Okay,
that they do.
that's
Right.
Yeah.
Based on what they've got, and it's training the new customer as the hobby changes. You can't just lie back and wait for it to come out anymore. You've got to at least speak forward that you're interested in something to help those that are producing the item,
Right.
that maybe you really should make this item.
Right.
Or if there's no interest at all, then I guess we're not going to make it.
Is it because there's less product being sold, or is it the interest becoming so specialized that's driving that change from having a manufacturer that would create, 10,000 GP9s and put them in a blue box and off they go at every hobby shop around the country?
Yeah, well, I think because there are less hobby shops, there's probably less places to actually house these items, because there aren't nearly even the amount of distributors as there used to be.
Right.
That would buy these items and have them sit on their shelves for us to buy, us meaning hobby shops, to buy from, 6
Distributor.
or 8 or 10
Right.
months later.
Right. Right.
It goes right from the manufacturer straight to the storefront now.
So that's the distributor, and that intermediate warehousing
Is gone.
is gone.
Because
right.
it costs money. Costs
Right.
money to warehouse anything.
Bob, when you started retailing in '93, what was the mail order situation in terms of shipping stuff out and where it was going? You surely have seen a difference.
Oh, it was probably close to zero. People would come to the shop knowing what it was. They would make a destination shop. Of course, gas was a lot cheaper then too. And then our website was online about 95. And right away we started getting orders, but people would still either use the website to shop and then come in the store. Like people would have
I do that.
lists. Yeah, exactly.
that a
Yeah,
lot.
one of our
Right.
best things we ever did was have a little wish list pad
Yeah.
that people would pick up and go home and put their groceries on it, but they'd also put what they needed for their trains.
Oh, neat.
And our name, is there. And
Yeah.
but anyways, it the last probably 10 years, huge explosion of people buying online.
Yeah.
But they want to buy from somebody that a lot of times that they know if they have an issue or a problem, they're still going to be there. so many internet-only sites have come and gone, and I can name a few in the Toronto area that have left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. But because we still have a physical store, they know that even though they're buying online constantly from Calgary or Edmonton or Germany, as an example, they still know if they have a problem, we're not disappearing, we're still there.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big difference nowadays, to have both an internet presence and a physical presence going forward.
Yeah.
But it's grown out.
I've come into the store to see you a few times, and you've been in the back helping with shipping because it's been busy.
Yeah.
And I go back there, and there's tape guns and boxes, and
Yeah.
there's stacks of stuff going out. And I'm thinking, wow, here you are, a brick and mortar shop, but a certain percentage of your business now is just out the door to people who have never kicked the bricks. They've never come to see you.
Yeah, they can't because they're so far away, or it's cost prohibitive, for gas purposes, or they've given up a car or something. And because shipping has become, especially in Canada, I mean, you can have somebody sends us an order in the morning, we'll have it packed up, paid for, out the door by 1 o'clock. In some cases, they'll get it the next day.
Right.
Like
Amazon Prime. That's what my wife has. That you literally get it the next day.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
The last thing I want to mention before I let you guys go is, and how the hobby has changed, and as prototype modelers, I think you'll understand where I'm going with this, is the prevalence or the relative ease and how much research material is at our fingertips.
Yeah.
Neil and I were having breakfast this morning, and we've got our phones out, and we're referencing road numbers on engines and models, and we're literally having eggs together. And I'm going, Neil, look at this, and he's going, Bob, look at this, and
the waitress is shaking her head.
Yeah, she's wondering what are these? One of these guys just talk to each other, but literally just a couple of taps on a screen and search, and I'm showing Neil the very thing that I'm talking about, or if you're rail fanning, we're watching trains go by, and you want to know about a certain locomotive, you just punch it in, and you've got the specs, the weight. The dimensions of it, what year it was built, and
how many car numbers they had, or how many.
Neil, I know you do a lot of research.
Yeah.
Just for how you weather a car.
There's some great websites out there that probably, like the Fallen Flags website, our Picture Archives, any of the other prototype base. I go on any rail for not just rolling stock photos, but location photos, modeling specific locations. I'm always looking for photos of CP Rail, as a famous search I have on my queue, CP Rail in Vermont. And just type in Canadian Pacific in Vermont, and it's amazing. Every month or two I do that with like Pinterest, some of those websites and stuff like that. You can always find photos of sometimes, especially buildings that are no longer present. That's a great research tool. So
and you can back up Google Earth now too,
with images,
certain years, and go back to something's not there anymore. I think of East Millinocket, where the mill's not there. You can back it up to when it used to be there and see where the tracks went and all that sort of.
And then you have the measuring tool, so you can go in, you can get dimensions on buildings, feet. That's fantastic.
On the rail fan side of things, I have friends who are hardcore rail fans, and they're using Google Earth to trace where old rail lines were, and where industrial spurs may have been at one time, or a roundhouse, and a lot of times it's interesting. There's actually scars in the landscape where you can see where the trees are, see where it was, or the trees are on a funny angle, or something like that.
In most cases, when you look on Google Earth, even if the railroad line's been abandoned for 40 years, I can always you can trace it. You can just see there's just the way you can almost see like property lines, angles, things like that. You can see where it is.
Cuts.
If you know what you're looking for, we could probably all do.
Yeah. Dave, the O-Scale Club that you belong to, the Toronto O-Scale Model Railroad Club, you must have seen a ton of changes there. I mean, my goodness, you've told us when the club opened, what year roughly?
The club started in 1938.
In 38,
wow.
Yeah.
Pre-World War II. Was the original building not used as munitions?
It started in one of the guys' basements, and then it was located at Union Station during the war years, and then on early in 1946 they moved to Liberty Village, which was an old munitions manufacturing plant.
Yeah, okay, it was
and
that building.
The two rooms they were in the basement were actually test firing ranges for Bren guns that were built for World War II. So the club back then, I mean, it was paper fiber ties, it was drawn steel rail, code 172. This stuff was, about this tall, right? And it was, and there was actually still some of it there, and it was outside third rail was used extensively, and so I mean that was O scale in the day. It was that's what you had. That's what you had to do.
So you fired up a train, the lights dimmed.
Yeah. And, some people had
in the whole community.
In the whole community.
Speed control was rather digital. It was either off or full. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how some people ran their trains. And actually, they didn't run the layout. Most of the time, they spent building the layout, and only during open houses would they actually operate the trains, because gentlemen didn't operate trains. It was more of a, only for the show, only for the paying public would they do that.
Yeah.
So they've seen a lot of changes, and you go from that very basic changes to being completely digital and embracing computers.
And here you are in the new home that you've been in for a few years now,
Right.
running trains with JMRI
Right.
and iPads and the
it was
latest
pretty neat.
sound decoders
Yeah.
and DCC, and you've been able to unwire the layout a little bit.
You said DCC simple, just one wire.
Yeah. I saw the wiring under the old layout. Yeah, it gave me
Rat's Nest comes to mind.
Gave me the cold chills, actually.
Yeah,
So,
and it had been rebuilt once. You look at some of the old horror stories in wiring. Horror stories.
Guys, I got to tell. I hear our fourth guest is going to cut me off this time. I deserve it. I'll start this point. I may have to come back to it. I really do think that there is going to be a pendulum swing when it comes to the kids and the video games, and even the adults in the video games. I think people are getting tired of playing Grand Theft Auto every night. I think they're getting tired of being on social media all the time. And I'll hold that thought.
I think it's a freight.
As our fourth guest wanders past, let's go have a look at it.
I'm going to guess no DPU with 3 engines up front.
No, I wouldn't think so. Although this is probably going all the way to Halifax.
Must be cooler tomorrow.
There's a young kid filming the train going by.
Yeah, just what we were talking about.
How many trains have come by since we've been here?
Like 15.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. 15.
Notice how they're all 40-footers.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, sea container.
They're going right to Halifax, probably.
Probably, yeah. CN runs a train one way each day. They have train 100 and 101. They go Halifax, Vancouver. It's a total land bridge.
How many of those are loaded? How many trench containers?
Yeah.
Actual containers.
Yeah, it's hard to tell, right?
Could be this because it all looks like offshore sea containers.
If they came into Halifax, were they coming in from Asia, Canada, Canal? They were loads going that way, and it's day.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Or it's Canadian products going overseas. You can usually tell by how much the compression.
Those stay off.
Well, that's interesting. That's a power unit. Right there. That's
Yeah.
that with the green plug on it. That's actually a mobile power unit that they would use to power the refrigerators. Yeah.
Those look really
Double stack.
Oh yeah.
Those are VD. It's a five set free new one.
Now, do they all do crew changes here? Because he's slowing right down.
Do they?
All do crew changes here.
Yeah, down at the east end, they call it Elmwood. It's a crew change point down on the triple track.
Yeah, because he's slowing right down.
Yeah.
So that's their, what, from backyard to here? That's wow.
It's 2 hours. 2 hours.
Yeah, but they get a full day's pay for that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know where they run from.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah.
This portion of the platform is brought to you by Roomettes, the fastest way to bring the illusion of 3D detail to the insides of your model railroad structures. And by Fast Tracks, helping the world build better railroads with a complete line of high-quality hand tools, specially selected for hand-laying track work.
Here we were talking about changes in the hobby and young people, and we go to look at our fourth guest go by, and there's a young man down at the crossing with his iPhone out,
Right.
filming
Filming
trains.
the whole thing.
And he might have a YouTube channel, who knows? It could be up on the internet, could be sharing it on social media.
Right.
I think there's going to be, it might be happening already, but I think if not, we're on the cusp of it. There's going to be a renaissance in this hobby where people get back to building. I think people want something tactile to do with their hands. I think they're tired of looking at LCD screens all the time. I'm talking about 12-year-olds and I'm talking about 50-year-olds. I know 50-year-olds that play video games. Nothing wrong with that, but it's
Right.
not just, the video game culture is not just a teenage thing. And I think the Grand Trunk, I think the Grand Trunk Auto. I think the Grand Theft Auto is going to get old after a while, and I think people are going to be left wanting for something tactile to do.
Right.
And I think that there's going to be a resurgence or a renaissance that may come about in this hobby. What do you think?
I think so. I mean, I have 2 stepsons and a daughter that spend a lot of time on their computers and stuff like that. But I still see. But I was mentioning earlier about I see a lot of younger rail fans out there too, which means there's an interest in the hobby.
Which we just saw.
Yeah,
Saw an
we just
example
saw
of
it.
that.
I was out Friday down in Orleans, New York, at the Western New York and Pennsylvania's yard there, and got there about 7 a.m. One of the recent releases is basically their Western New York and Pennsylvania is going to be replacing their Alcos with GE
So
AC6000s,
sad.
which is sad. And on the way out here, I said, well, geez, here's an opportunity. I've never been out here. I can get out there and take some pictures. But I got out to the engine facility in the morning. The sun is just beautiful, coming right from the east, just lights up the whole engine house. I got there about 7 a.m. and there was already about 7 or 8 people out there, and there was 3 kids, probably 12 or 13, had their cameras set up, jump right at the front of the line to get some shots.
Very cool.
So it was pretty cool to see that. So, and I see a lot of it on YouTube. Kids posting, you can tell that the younger kids posting stuff like that. A lot of kids question. So a lot of the forums too. A lot of people on the forums.
Bob, I'm going to skip over you and end with you on this. Dave, what do you think?
I kind of have mixed feelings about it. I mean, I think video games it's a tough nut to crack because you've got these companies out there with, $100 million budgets that can make some pretty enticing visual scenes, and especially now with the video games that you can actually become first person. You can actually get engrossed into it. And you
Virtual
with
reality.
virtual reality, you're transported into that. That's pretty engrossing. But I mean, I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, though, whether you've played a video game, whether you're sitting at your computer or put on the goggles, whatever, you haven't done anything. That's right. You've moved some electrons around in a computer chip. Great. But if you're the type of person like me, I like to have sort of a tactile feeling that when I've spent 3 hours doing something, well, there's a result for it. as opposed to the next high score in the game, right? I've never found that fascinating, but maybe there's a way that people can mold into that. And with, like I said before, with the advent of computer-based modeling, whether it's laser engravers, 3D printers, or whatever comes next, there's a whole group of people that'll be completely into that aren't today.
Bob, I want to end with you on this because you have a unique perspective. You see people coming through your doors and your orders, your online orders. Do you think there's anything to that? Am I way off base? Is it wishful thinking? What do you think? Do you think there's going to be this resurgence into building and interest in hobbies?
There's always hope. I talked to a lot of the guys that work at the shop, and we've all seen the same thing where people have lost touch with their hands. They don't want, how do you use a knife? How do you hold a ruler? Some of the basic skills that we all kind of grew up with as kids and use for modeling, some of the kids of today don't know how to use that. And I hope that you see that, because I certainly see a lot of kids coming in the store. I certainly see a lot of kids wanting to get in the hobby. It's whether their parents help them and have enough time to be with them and support them. But I'm with Dave on with all the new advents of laser cutters and the Bluetooth controllers and all that sort of thing to kind of get the younger crowd involved in some of the forward thinking, DCC and all this stuff that 20 years ago nobody knew what it was.
Yeah.
Or, you couldn't even think about. Who knows what the next 20 years holds for us?
Yeah. And I don't believe I'm a little counterculture on this subject a little bit. But that's okay. I'm okay being a gang of one. I don't think it's our job to proselytize kids or to hand out flyers, and I don't think it's our job to get kids into the hobby. I think because we were kids that got into the hobby, I think it happens organically. Mm-hmm. I think if a kid's going to be involved in a building hobby or in rail fanning or model trains, it's not going to be because I befriended him. It's going to be because it was something within them. But my hope is that when they organically come to the hobby, that the hobby is in such a great state that there's something to grab them and for them to get the enjoyment out of it that we've all gotten out of it. And I've said time and time again, this hobby has been so good to me over the years. I've met great people. I've had an opportunity to do interesting things. I've glued various parts of my body to other various parts of my body untold times. It's been quite an odyssey. But, if there's something that we can do, to help the kids who want to be in the hobby to come along, then I think it's good that we do that. But at the end of the day, the want and the desire has to come from them. You can't make somebody be interested in something.
Yeah.
Right. You're not going to get, all of a sudden the 40-year-old decides to get into the hobby and said, I'm going to spend $15,000 on model railway equipment. So, in some ways you have to plant the seed early. So you have to spawn that interest early. And maybe, like you say, there's that person. I see it all the time when people that we bring on board at Little Canada. There's lots of young people out there who have never really built a model, but boy, when you start showing them how and the techniques and the abilities, they're phenomenal model builders. So creativity, patience, good, you can work with your hands. A lot of people have that, so it's just a matter of uncorking it.
So I'm going to mark all of you guys down as we all agree that the hobby's alive and well. It's changing, it's evolving, but we're changing. We're changing and evolving.
Everybody changes every day.
We're all losing hair. We're graying.
Speak for yourself.
I will speak for myself. I'm getting gray.
Yep.
Yeah.
It just
Guys,
transfers. The hair transfers from
Yeah.
other to other. Never mind.
Not only is Dave the Hair Club president. Guys, thanks again for being here. Another great night on the platform. It's a little cooler tonight than previous nights.
Yeah.
Our fourth guest stopped by. I think we had, was it a 7.5 on the grade crossing earlier?
Yeah.
We got to go check for.
Yeah, I got to
new-
check the video
right.
on that. I might upgrade it to an 8. We'll see if there's any oil on the rails.
It sparks even more.
Yeah. Guys, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining me tonight. And thanks again for joining us on the platform. We'll see you next time.